Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
Ladies and gentlemen, in the world of Hollywood and horror movies in the 80s and 90s, it was not people that made the world go round. It was the rubber that made the world go round. And guess what? If you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean that you're in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast, where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals as we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and in a conversational fashion for this audio-only experience. And if you like this audio-only experience, please like and subscribe this audio-only experience. We're available on all major platforms, all major podcast providers like Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and plus we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we would absolutely appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. We're on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram, Letterboxd, the TikTok, the Blue Sky, the Threads. We're at far too many places at In the Seats for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit over at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, basically the moving image at large. Because guess what? If we love to watch it and write about it and talk about it, we love it all that much more when you come by and read about it and listen about it. So please do us that ultimate kindness. Come on by and pay us a visit. We'd really appreciate it. On this episode, we're actually navigating the mean streets of Montreal, albeit virtually, for the 30th anniversary of the Fantasia International Film Festival that celebrates all things genre, horror, sci-fi, basically weird shit, because we love it and we know you do. And we had the unique opportunity of sitting down in advance of one of the world premieres that is coming up. Well, it'll be tonight. By the time you hear this, or tomorrow. With the premiere of Rubberhead: The Life and Monsters of Steve Johnson, and we talked with the man behind the lens making this film, telling the story of Steve Johnson, who was a legendary visual effects makeup guy in the 80s and the 90s for so many big movies, but a lot of sort of the schlocky fun stuff that people had that people are very fond of. And this guy had he had a wild life and a wild story, and it deserved to be put on screen, that's for damn sure. And we talked with Nick about that and so very much more. But like I said, Rubberhead: The Life and Monsters of Steve Johnson is having its world premiere at Fantasia in Montreal this coming Thursday, July 23rd, as part of their Documentaries from the Edge series. If there are tickets available, I do recommend you go check it out, because it is a hell of a movie. But first, enjoy our talk with Nick, because it's a pretty darn good one, and we'll see you soon. Nick, man, first off, just, I got to watch it last night, and I mean, congrats on the movie, and congrats on being Fantasia, man.
Oh, thank you.
It's a fun movie, and I think audiences are going to eat it up.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I hope so, but I thank you.
Now, I mean, I guess the first question is, like, not because this is your first movie, it feels like telling Steve's story was a bold thing to sort of tackle for someone's first movie. Like, what made you want to sort of jump into Steve's life and tell his story?
Well, I've known about him. I've been a fan of his for a really, really long time. I was kind of a lonely horror kid. I was into very creepy, scary movies and monster stuff and blood and gore. And I didn't have many friends who were into this weird stuff that I was into. So I felt like a little bit of an outcast. But then I saw Scare Tactics and I saw Steve, this cool, strapping, handsome guy who's at the top of this industry, who's doing all the crazy, insane, wonderful, monster, bloody stuff that I love, but he's doing it for a living. And not only that, but he's at the top of the industry. And he has this gorgeous, accomplished wife being Linnea Quigley, and he's just living this rock star life. So, I mean, it blew my mind as a kid, because these things that I thought made me so different, I see this really awesome, cool guy doing this stuff. And it made me feel kind of less alone, but it also showed that this is an actual life path, that you can pursue this thing that you're passionate about, regardless of how bizarre it is or how alone it makes you feel. But as a kid, he made me feel less alone, which was huge for me. So fast forward many, many, many years later, I met him at Monsterpalooza, started learning more about his life and stories, and he told me all these incredible, insane stories. And one story after another is about a major movie, a major director, a lot of drugs involved, a lot of insanity, and just debauchery and he just was kind of like the Wolf of Wall Street of 80s horror. And after the more I learned about him, the more I just was like, somebody has to tell this story, and it should be me. So it took a while, but we were off to the races.
Well, I guess that's my next question because I mean, stories at the bar are one thing. I can imagine it might have been a little bit arm twisting to sort of get some of these on camera.
Actually, you'd be surprised. He's very honest about everything, about the drugs, about the addictions, about the bridges burned, about mistakes made, lessons learned. He is very self-effacing. He's had a lot of time to reflect, and he doesn't hold back. The challenge was getting him to be vulnerable on camera and getting him to not be so on, because when we had the cameras on him, he's kind of a Hollywood guy and he's a real rock on tour, and his inclination is to be fun and entertaining. But after a while, I was like, just dial it down, man. It's great. We have it. We have enough of that. We just want to see your vulnerability. So that was the challenge, and it was helpful for me to just take a DSLR and go hang out with him in his apartment, and his guard would come down and he would let a little more vulnerability out. But yeah, he had no issue talking about things that otherwise would have made people squirm.
Now, I mean, I guess that leads to my next question because I mean, obviously, I love how you track his career, and I mean, he really did feel like he came up as sort of the right guy at the right time. Given his work on Ghostbusters and how sort of the film industry was evolving at that stage. But I mean, considering how much of a live wire he is, like I'm kind of wondering, like, how did you manage to steer the conversation, or is there sort of an hour about solar babies that you sort of have left on a hard drive that you couldn't use in the movie?
It was a mixture of both. He doesn't like being interrupted, but he also can like get off course pretty easily. So you kind of learn after a while the especially when you're doing as many interviews with somebody as I did with him. We did like 7 or 8 sit down interviews that were like 4 or 5 hours long over the course of many years. But I started to learn his rhythm. And sometimes I would ask him warm up questions that I knew wouldn't be in the documentary. But you just kind of got to get somebody warmed up and talking, and especially him. I knew what he liked talking about. I knew what he didn't like talking about. I knew what exhausted him and the stories that he had told 100 times. So I kind of knew how to sequence interviews. Like, okay, he hates talking about this, but we have to talk about it. So let's talk about it up front, and then we'll give him something fun to talk about that'll probably not be in the movie, but he loves talking about it, but I don't want to exhaust him. So, there was definitely some maintenance involved to that degree. But I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did though, because it feels like the
Okay.
Predator story might have been one of those movies. Because I mean, I'd heard a little bit about it, and there's always been a bit of lore about
Oh
what
yeah.
went on sort of the Predator set. But to sort of get that kind of detail and that kind of, I guess I don't want nuance to sort of really the mess that it really was really interesting.
Oh, cool, cool. Yeah, that was one of those stories that he was tired of telling because he had told it
That's
so
yeah,
many
it's kind of what
times.
I figured. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But he's still, to his credit, he's great in telling it in the movie. He has just as much energy, so he was able to. He's always able to rise to the occasion, which I really appreciated.
What was it hard to get other people involved, like Leanna, to get John involved to sort of give counterbalance to sort of Steve's Madman stories?
Not really. I mean, we had some sort of like very, very difficult to find directors that we originally were going to start going after, and we sought a few other experts, but then we realized, first of all, that it's very time consuming to lock those people down, and it's just like there's better ways to spend your time when you're working on a movie like this, because they would have been great to have, but we wouldn't have had the intimacy of that we did end up having with the people that we did choose to work with, because everybody interviewed knew Steve really well and saw a very different side to him during a different time period. And Linnea especially knew him personally and professionally. So we became very selective about only talking to people who knew him on a very deeply personal level. So that gave the movie an intimacy to it that we really did like. Instead of having like an objective sort of expert on effects or horror or whatever, we ended up having people who were in the trenches with them, either emotionally or professionally. But they were all wonderful to talk to. They really were.
How important was it for you to sort of give us an arc to his career? Because I mean, obviously, you could focus a lot on Ghostbusters or Predator, things like that. But when you can say Howling Four in the same breath, it definitely sort of gives sort of a different dichotomy to sort of the level of work that he was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, we did. Thanks for noticing that. Yeah, we did want to show that he had these highlights, he had these huge movies, and he was kind of the Forrest Gump of horror. Like before he started his company, he goes to Hollywood. One of the first movies he works on is The Howling alongside Rob Bottin. Then he works with Rick Baker on American Werewolf in London. Then once he leaves Rick Baker, his first movie is Ghostbusters. It's just like an incredible amount of some of the greatest hits. But then from there, he goes on and he starts his own company and does enormous movies like Species and big effects masterpieces. But yeah, also does like Howling 4 and some of these lesser known movies. But the point we were trying to make, we wanted to show that some of these movies had incredible effects because
Oh yeah.
he almost, yeah, but he almost was kind of prestige blind to the big super Hollywood blockbuster versus the little indie horror sequel that who knows how many people are going to watch. He worked as hard on one as the other, and he was never ever satisfied to just kind of phone it in, regardless of how small or seemingly obscure the movie was. He would give it his all, but he always wanted to do something different. He did a werewolf one way on one movie. When they do it again, he has to do it a different way. And I bet work ethic of innovation and not doing things the same way twice was something I really wanted to highlight. And I think by juxtaposing, like he's got these huge movies, but he also has these little movies, and he works as hard on one than the other. Just that work ethic, I was really struck by and really wanted to highlight that.
Well, and also, I mean, the film really does highlight, uh, and I mean, I don't mean this in a negative way, but I mean, it's sort of the, like, like how like these creative people can have blinders on to sort of their way and doing things sort of the way they're used to doing them, and seeing sort of, the stories from Blade 2 with Guillermo and sort of you know, him losing the grip on sort of the way he used to do things
Mm-hmm.
was a little sad, but also really interesting at the same time because again, he is that kind of guy that feels like it's like if you keep him in his lane, he's going to deliver you gold. But if you
Yeah.
ask him to sort of step just a little, like a millimeter outside on either end, he's going to crash the car.
Yeah, that sounds about accurate. Yeah, I think it was a big adaptation for him to deal with the rise of CGI, as it was all the effects artists.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think he was heartbroken because he had his way of doing things, and his work ethic was so hard and so serious that when things could be replaced digitally, something that he agonized over for months and figured out how to do and invented techniques for doing, if it was just digitally glossed over with CGI, it was heartbreaking. It was. Um, so yeah, that was definitely difficult. It was definitely difficult.
were there any movies or anything sort of in his canon that you couldn't talk about or you had to leave on the cutting room floor just because you couldn't get sort of rights to clips or anything like that?
Not so much because of rights reasons or because it was off the record or like we're not
Right.
allowed to talk about Howling Seven, the marsupials or whatever. There's none of that. There was no shortage of amazing stories, though. I mean, it was like an embarrassment of riches. It is a good problem to have, but we had all these. There were a bunch of scenes I wanted in there that we ended up having to cut that were awesome. I mean, it's why we still have physical media. I think the special features on this are going to be pretty rocking. But there were all of these movies he
See,
did
yeah.
that, in a lot of cases, we made scenes for. Like we had a scene about the failed Tim Burton Superman movie that he worked
Yeah.
on, and he worked on this really elaborate Hulk movie that was insane. And he built these towering um, animatronics that have this just incredible hand articulation and things like that. We had to cut that. There's this wonderful story about him working with Richard Pryor, where Richard Pryor was doing an autobiographical movie about his own life,
Oh wow,
and
okay.
Steve had to recreate the burn makeup or
Oh
recreate the
wow.
burns that Richard Pryor had when he lit himself on fire freebasing. And Steve he studied actual photos of Richard Pryor's face from a burn center that took care of him. And then when he presented the makeup to him, it was so intense for Richard Pryor that he couldn't handle it. And it
Oh
just brought
wow.
him to a dark place that he just ran and he left the studio, and Steve ended up getting fired. Like there's so many incredible stories like that that we just didn't have a place for. So yeah, the biggest challenge was cutting stuff, and we had this very long sequence about Steve's relationship with H.R. Giger. When you have two artists that are both kind of on
Yeah.
the fringes of
Yeah.
sanity, and you put them
Yeah.
together on something, yeah. So there was a lot of killing of darlings in the Hemingway sense.
How was Steve with, like you said, showing the lowlights? Because I mean, it was fun to see, but I can imagine sort of in hindsight, blowing a big advance on having a massive Halloween party, he could probably look back on and go, yeah, that was pretty stupid.
I mean, he had a good time though. I think he's focusing on the positive. I think that there were some lessons learned, but I think he is grateful for the ride. There is a sort of glee he gets in recounting these old stories, and I mean, he had a hell of a time. I mean, how could you not? I had a hell of a time making it. I can't imagine what kind of a time he had living this. Um, but yeah.
Now, I mean, for you as a filmmaker, and now that sort of you're at the end of this process, like, is there anything you kind of learned or kind of gleaned from getting so much time with an industry veteran like Steve? Because I mean, I can imagine, there are stories beyond stories beyond stories that, is there one in particular that kind of stood out for you that you applied to your life?
Oh, it's a great question because I wanted this to be like a creative pill that people could take. They could watch this movie at the start of a project, or if they needed a creative boost or inspiration, because I'm very inspired by him and I learned so much about creativity, about art, about, horror, about all of this stuff. He's very fascinating, very articulate, very smart, and very hardworking, always has been. But I think at the height of his success, XFX, his effects company, I called it the Google of practical effects because he hired entire people and entire departments, and their only job was to come up with new things that had never been done before, regardless of whether they had a movie to put it on. So he would just come up with this just library of inventions of different effects techniques that maybe they'll find something to do with it, years from now. So every time there was a movie, they would just go, "Oh, let's look at all the stuff we invented, and we can find something for this effect or that effect that they had that nobody had ever done before." So that ethic of innovation, I was really inspired by, and I think what he
For
was
sure.
trying to do was incredible. I mean, there were a confluence of forces that did ruin everything. One of which was CGI, the other of which was his own addiction.
Yeah.
Third of which was, definitely overspending. To run a studio like that is incredibly
Right, right,
expensive. But the ambition behind it, I thought, was incredibly admirable and really really cool.
right.
So I
Well,
think
yeah.
I learned the value of obsession, but also that you got to counter that obsession with some self care. And if you have addiction issues, it helps to deal with them because if that foundation isn't sturdy, anything you build on top of it is going to be shaky. So a lot of lessons learned.
No, for sure. And I mean, last question, just put a bow on this because I mean, you mentioned physical media before, and I mean, just to tell this guy's story really feels like it is so vital to just sort of the history of cinema and understanding that obsession and understanding sort of the need for the off the wall, the crazy, the almost dangerous levels of creativity that are needed to
Mm-hmm.
innovate when making stuff like this. I mean, for you as a filmmaker, how do you think these kind of behind the scenes movies are important for us going forward as, we live in a world that's become either sort of indified or sort of commodified with the sort of the nine digit blockbuster kind of movies.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm very encouraged to see what Obsession and Backrooms did,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
yeah, it's really it's incredible, and it's nothing really new for the horror genre. It happened with Blair Witch. It happened with Paranormal Activity. It's like this happens. All of those movies are pretty lo-fi and pretty, you know, not very expensive and mostly rely on practical effects. And even Curry Barker was a very outspoken fan of practical effects, and they did a lot of practical stuff on Obsession. Not to mention Backrooms; those sets were, for the most part, all practical, which is
Yeah,
what
yeah,
gave
yeah.
it such an immersive sensibility. And I think that's what one of the many reasons that movie hit as hard as it did is because they're immersive and it's real sets in your mind's eye believes it. But I'm very encouraged to see that because I do think we are living in this threat of AI looming over everything. And one of the big intentions with this movie after a while was to just validate that no, that craft that you've been obsessing over for years, even if AI claims it can do it, it's not going to do it better. And it still matters to develop these artistic skills and abilities, regardless of whatever happens with technology. Because, I mean, I keep telling people who are afraid of AI's encroachment on film, we still go to plays thousands of years later because we want to see what human beings are capable of doing in real time. We want to see what human beings are capable of doing on cinema. I think that need to be impressed by and wowed by what humans are capable of through ingenuity, obsession, dedication, and craft. I don't think that'll ever go away. And that was one of the big intentions with this movie, was to show that.
100%, man. But I mean, just again, congrats on Rubberhead and have fun in Montreal, man. It's Steve's kind of town. I think you're gonna have a great. I mean, you're gonna have a great time. But just
Thank you
again,
so
thank you for the
much.
time today, man, and congrats on the work.
My pleasure, Dave. Thank you.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.